Cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for showing up again. So we are on step 10. We'll do step 10 and then 2 steps to go. We'll be all finished, which is cool. So the spiritual principles that I thought about with step 10 were patience and perseverance. I like this definition of patience: the capacity to accept or tolerate trouble or suffering without getting angry or upset. Perseverance, steadfastness in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. That's perfect for step work because we're in it for the long haul. So step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So I thought we'd do some reading. There's a lot of really good information, both in the Big Book and the 12 by 12 on step 10. My 5 favorite words in the Big Book are in this part of the reading, I think. Yes, they are. So the discussion on step 10 begins on page 84. And I want to kind of just reference what's right before the discussion on step 10 that we read last week, and that was the promises. And I'm going to say again what the Big Book had to say about that is, in terms of the promises, is that they will always materialize if we work for them. That's a bold statement, and it's something that I believe with all my heart. The promises will materialize if we work for them. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance is our code. I think that's beautiful. So at this point in your step work, step 10, you've kind of done a lot of work, and you've got a lot of new understandings about yourself and your life and what happens in your life. And this is kind of a map for moving forward. So the 4th step that we did is a very thorough inventory process. The 10th step, the Big Book refers to it as a spot check inventory. And I call them, hi Ann, how are you? Sorry. You're good, honey. I call them 10-minute inventories. Now, my process is still to write it down. Why? Well, one of the most interesting things my sponsor ever said to me was, "You're hopelessly delusional." Dang it. The writing process of inventory really, really helps me to get clear. I don't really, even 21 years into working steps for diligently, I don't trust my mind so much when it comes to figuring things out. And so I put up a little piece of paper here, and I'm hoping that somebody got mad at somebody this week, and we can do 1 or 2 quick 10-minute inventories, kind of as a demonstration of a process for working a 10th step. Does that all make sense? Cool. So right after it says love and tolerance of others is our code, it says, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone. I really like that. We have ceased fighting. We've put our arrogance, belligerence, judgmentalism, control, people-pleasing, we put that stuff down. Because that stuff is a way to engage fear and defensiveness. and to fight with people or to pull on them. We talked a lot about putting your end of the stick down, right? If you're in a tug of war with someone and you put your end of the stick down, there's no fight anymore, right? And then it says on page 85, we are not, well, actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil as if from a hot flame. So that's true of alcoholics, right? They lose their obsession with alcohol and they recoil from it. And as an Al-Anon, I like to think of recoiling in the same way around the behaviors that I used to engage as an Al-Anon. Like I turn away from that stuff. I recoil from it. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. I like that too. We don't take away our own fears and make ourselves better, right? This is something that happens as a result of the step work. It happens organically. We don't have to try to make it happen. We don't have to push it into happening. It's a result of working the steps that the changes come naturally. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experiences. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And I like the terminology there, in fit spiritual condition. So if we want to stay fit physically, right, especially as we age, I can testify to this. We can't just have wishful thinking about it. If we want to stay fit physically, it requires a commitment on our part, right? A dedication to taking care of our body and keeping ourselves strong and healthy. And it's the same with the step work. If we want to be in fit spiritual condition, a pretty much a willingness to constantly examine, pay attention to what's going on, pay attention to how I'm reacting, pay attention to if I'm resentful, also known as upset, right? Also known as a little angry, right? Or irritated, or frustrated, or annoyed. It doesn't have to be a fire, right? It can be something small. Whoops. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. We are not cured as Al-Anons, right? We're not cured. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. It repeats it again, right? It says it again. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done.
Can you repeat that reprieve?
Yeah. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And then it says, it describes a map for what we're supposed to do every day. Every day, we carry a vision of God's will for us into our day, okay? That's our mindset. That's our attitude toward the day as it unfolds. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. So in the first step, we admit that we're powerless and our lives are unmanageable, right? We're aimed right at the 11th step, where we have knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out, right? So the journey through the steps is about going from a situation where we are powerless and unmanageable, difficult things are happening, into a spot where we have authentic, love-based, comes from God, power. And when it says knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out, that just means to me that my life is now about love. It's about love. It's about doing the next right thing. It's about examining when that doesn't happen and being willing to own it, and then constantly moving forward in that way. And I think to be authentically empowered is, well, you guys know that they call this the Al-Anon Salute, right?
Yeah.
Boy, woe is me. My life sucks, right? So there is a seductiveness around powerlessness for Al-Anons. And I think to fight against that through step work, honesty, all the things we've talked about, to fight against that as diligently as an alcoholic or a drug addict has to fight to stay clean and sober, is what we're being asked to do, right? So from powerlessness to authentic power.
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time, what we're being asked to do? You just said.
So it says, every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. Mm-hmm. So that tells us what our focus has to be. Mm-hmm. And we go from, in the first step where we're powerless and things are unmanageable, as we work the steps, what happens organically is we become empowered people. Okay. But we're empowered by love. Mm-hmm. Like fear and all that stuff has force, right? It's not static energy to be resentful, judgmental, self-righteous, afraid. That's not static energy. There's a lot of energy there, but it isn't authentic power because it's fear. So it's more of a force, I would call it a dark force, that we've used to move forward in our lives, and we trade that in for reliance on a higher power and on unconditional love. And we're willing to keep looking at ourselves to make sure that's the way we're going. Did that answer your question, Mimi? All right, good. Cool. Much has been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious, but we must develop this vital sixth sense. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. And then that's where step 11 starts. And so my favorite words in the Big Book are actually coming next week. I got mixed up about that. They're in step 11. Cool. So there's a lot of really good information, too, on step 10 in the AA 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And there's a whole chapter, as usual, devoted to step 10 in here. So there were a few things I wanted to highlight in here. I'm talking over there too, that's confusing. A continuous look at our assets and liabilities and a real desire to learn and grow by this means are necessities for us, okay? For the wise have always known that no one can make much of his life until self-searching becomes a regular habit, until he is able to admit and accept what he finds, and until he patiently and persistently tries to correct what is wrong. So those are the 3 A's to me: awareness, acceptance, and then action, right? When a drunk has a terrific hangover because he drank heavily yesterday, he cannot live well today. But there is another kind of hangover which we all experience whether we are drinking or not. That is the emotional hangover, the direct result of yesterday's and sometimes today's excesses of negative emotion, anger, fear, jealousy, and the like. If we would live serenely today and tomorrow, we certainly need to eliminate these hangovers. That doesn't mean we need to wander morbidly around in the past. It requires an admission and correction of errors now. Our inventory enables us to settle with the past, okay? We do a thorough and searching, fearless moral inventory of ourselves in the 4th step, and it helps us to reconcile our past. It helps us to reconcile it. When our inventory is carefully taken and we have made peace with ourselves, the conviction follows that tomorrow's challenges can be met as they come. Okay? So we've talked before about every time I've worked the steps with anybody, that fourth and fifth step inventory process has a theme. There's a theme to the work that we're doing. There's something particular that we're working at. And we work through that in the fourth and fifth step. Then we move into 6 and 7 where we're ready to change, to have God change us. We make amends, and then we come to our 10th step where we continue to work on things as they come up. And with the work that I've done with people, again, step 10 is often kind of an echo of step 4 for a while, right? Because changing your thinking, changing your wiring in your brain, changing who you are is really hard work. And the character defects we develop, especially if they come from childhood beliefs, are things that we use to make ourselves feel safe and loved, right? They're funky things, right? They don't really work. But because they were our process for making ourselves feel safe and feel loved in the world, you've got to stay with that stuff till it's different. And if it takes a long time, it takes a long time. I had some pretty severe trauma as a child that went on for a long time. And when I got willing to work with my sponsor on that stuff, I almost don't want to tell you guys this, but it took about 10 years to get through it. It wasn't fiery for 10 years, right? It wasn't cataclysmic for 10 years, but it took about 10 years for me to really, really change what I thought, what I believed to be true about myself that came out of that trauma, right? And what my sponsor said to me, and at the time I was like, I don't think that's going to happen, was he said, it will be as if it never happened to you if you stay with it, Alice. And it is. It's as if it never happened to me. I don't ever think about it. It has no relevance to my life today. It's gone. And when I say don't quit before the miracle happens, that's kind of what I'm referencing. Now, you people might not be as messed up as I am, right? So it may not take you that kind of time to deal with what you've brought to the party in terms of your beliefs and what happened to you and how it's affecting you today. But I will tell you that my experience has been, I don't consider myself a survivor. It's like it happened to somebody else. It's just gone. It doesn't have any power over me anymore. And that is worth everything to me. Because I think when we transform that darkness into love, really transform it, right? It doesn't just heal me, right? It heals everybody that comes into contact with me. And guess what? I tend to attract women that have had similar or that kind of depth of experience, right? And I can hang with those people. And I'm not triggered by anything that happened to them. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't frighten me. And that's so cool, because then, I can bring light to their pain and they can let go of it too. And it's got this ripple effect in the world that's really beautiful. Mm-hmm. I also believe that stuff travels in families, like certain kinds of dysfunction, trauma, alcoholism, sexual stuff, money problems. They're kind of operating systems in family, and they tend to get passed on generation after generation. So when someone brings that stuff to love again, it kind of interrupts that, right? It breaks the chain of that. And I have interesting dreams when I'm working on stuff, and I have things that feel like visions to me. And when I started that work on my childhood stuff, I had this vision of this long line of little girls, and they were all dressed the same, and they all had masks on, and their masks were sorrow. They all had masks of sorrow on, this long line of little girls. And it was kind of in a black and white and gray, no color, very, very dark and kind of a heavy kind of picture that I got of all these little girls. And I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. You know, when somebody steps out of that line and brings it to love, it really impacts everybody in that family's impacted by it. Just like everybody in a family's impacted by alcoholism, whether in large ways or small ways, right? People are affected by the things that we carry, as long as we're affected. Does that all make sense? Okay, then it's going to talk about the spot check inventory taken at any time of the day whenever we find ourselves getting tangled up. I love that. I'm tangled up. There's the one we take at day's end when we review the happenings of the hour just past. Here we cast up a balance sheet, crediting ourselves with things well done and chalking up debits where due. That's a good thing to do. What went well today? How am I different? You know, how did I affect other people in a positive way? There are those occasions when alone or in the company of a sponsor or spiritual advisor, we make a careful review of our progress since the last time. So that's talking about doing a more thorough inventory again. Many AAs go in for annual or semi-annual house cleanings. Many of us also like the experience of an occasional retreat from the outside world where we can quiet down for an undisturbed day or so of self-overhaul and meditation. Okay? So that's the continuing process of self-examination. I love this. This is page 90. It is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. With us. But what about justifiable anger? If somebody cheats us, aren't we entitled to be mad? Can't we be properly angry with self-righteous folk? For us of AA, these are dangerous exceptions. We have found that justified anger ought to be left to those better qualified to handle it. I love that.
What does that mean?
Well, I would say that it means that for me, there is no justification for my anger. Now, that doesn't mean, so work, again, I'm going to reference that childhood stuff that I work through. So the grief process includes being mad, right? We deny, we bargain, we get mad, we get sad, we accept, right? So it doesn't mean that we push that aside when it's relevant to our recovery and it is expediting a spiritual process, okay? So I'm not saying that if you're in a grief process or you're dealing with things that have happened to you that are very sad and difficult, that you should never feel anger. But I don't ever justify anger in a current situation with another human being. If I'm angry with that human being, it's my anger. It's on me. And the process of an inventory can walk me out of that. So there's a caveat there, right? And when I was working through all that stuff with my sponsor, I finally really got mad. And one of the people I was mad at, my mom did not traumatize me. But she was a rough ride for me, my mom was, right? And so I told you guys on her 1-year anniversary, I wrote that poem called Stay Dead One More Year, right? So I was mad. And what my sponsor said to that was, hallelujah. It's about time you got mad, right? So, you know, I don't mean to intimate that when you're dealing with past situations that were difficult, you should never feel angry. But when I go to work and somebody comes into my office and says something and I ever so gently would like to run her over with my car, right? That's not okay, right? That's not okay. There's no justification for that kind of anger. If I'm angry, it's my job to figure out what's going on. It's my job to look at what I believe to be true and take responsibility for that. Mamie, did you have something?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, one of my favorite sayings, and it took me a while to understand the word, was dubious luxury of other men and women. You know, that kind of doubtful luxury of, what do you call it, justifiable anger. And it's such a challenge because there's so many situations in life and with other people, you know, how they act out toward you, what they say, their tone of voice, all of that would be justifiable anger.
Right.
I mean, and it would be so easy to walk into a club or anywhere and say, of course you'd be angry over that. And everyone would go, absolutely.
You could line up people to agree with you, right? They would agree with you, right?
So
Yeah.
it's just a real challenge for those of us in recovery
Right.
to really, really get that they can do whatever they
Right.
want out here, but it's got to be me
And
that works on myself.
And the coolest thing is when it really changes in here, it really changes in here. Angry people don't interact with me because they just aren't interested, because there's not that flashy, pushy thing that everybody loves, right, that goes on. And you guys have, most of you have been here through the whole thing, or most of it. You've heard me talk about my coworker. Like when I did the last inventory, I had to do more than one. But when I did the last one and I got to the 8th column and I was like, what? What do you want me to know here? And God literally said, I want you to see her like I see her. And I was like, oops. Whoopsie.
But it gave you the way out.
It did.
It gave you
And
freedom.
last week, she left me this message on my phone. Oh, thank you for this, and I appreciate your support, and you're doing such a great job. Because there's nothing for her to hook into, right? When there's nothing for them to hook into, then the fight's over. The fight's over. And angry, aggressive people aren't interested in me, as a general rule. If I'm not in fit spiritual condition, they start showing back up to help me understand where I'm at right now. And isn't that great? Right? It's beautiful, really. It's beautiful. I had a sponsee last week who has a lot going on, a lot of grief and very, very, very difficult things. And then something else blew up, and she was like, what the heck? And I'm doing my best, and, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, well, let's just write about it and see what happens. And what came out of that inventory was so helpful to her. It was amazing, right? And
She's getting stuck.
Yeah, you can get stuck in that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, Ann?
I sometimes feel, though, that anger is a malign feeling, because in itself it's not good or bad. It's a feeling, but it's what we do with it. I mean, the Vietnam War would still be going on if people hadn't gotten angry.
Right. And I think that there are people that can, there's a woman that I really admire, Marianne Williamson, who's very much involved in the Course in Miracles. And I love her passion for political justice, and I love her passion for, helping people that really deserve it. What I found with me is that I get trapped. If I feel like I'm justified in my anger, for me personally, it's a trap and it doesn't go well. So what would God have me do, right? Like, I'm pretty clear that he wouldn't have me run for president right now, right? That's not my arena. What is my arena? This is my arena. This is where I operate to do good in the 12-step modality,
So
right?
basically you're saying that there are people with, let's say, a gift who can harness that anger in a positive way, or
I think that's arguable. I think that's arguable. And I would call it passion.
okay.
I would call it more passion, which means with life,
Right.
with life, than anger.
So for me, that's just not one of my things often. But if I do get angry, I get irritated, yeah. But it shows me that there's something I need to work on.
Right.
I need to take some action and do something.
Good. So I would say anger is a great teacher. If anger flares up, it's a great teacher, right? Go into it and figure out what the heck is going on and what God would have you do. Yeah. I am tempted to get all worked up politically. I just can't afford it. I just can't afford it.
What
Yeah,
about,
I agree with you.
so something you and I worked on a lot is neutrality. So I think there could have been people protesting certain things, but they're neutral. They're not angry about it. They just take a stand on something that they believe in. They might not be angry.
That's a beautiful thing.
So like for me, like I made a decision to leave my husband when I was neutral, not when I was angry.
Right.
So I got to that place after doing all of this work
Mm-hmm.
that it was clear to me that I didn't want to be in a relationship with unacceptable behavior, and so I gave him a choice, and when he said no, I said, okay, well, I'm gonna move forward with a divorce. But I did that from a neutral place.
Good. That makes sense, doesn't
So I
it?
took a stand on what was okay and what wasn't, but I wasn't angry. You know, of course, at times I was, but
Yeah. Good, Molly. And Martin Luther King comes to my mind with passive resistance, nonviolent resistance, Mahatma Gandhi. Those people, I don't know how they did what they did, but I really admire them for it. And it was effective. It was effective, right? Yeah.
I wanted to say, it was effective, it was timeliness, it was
Mm.
important, it was necessary, it was brilliant. All of that occurred at exactly the moment in history when we needed it.
Good.
And then when I think about current times and all of that, everyone's doing so many different things and have pulled into so many areas, and it's easy for me to do as well.
Yeah.
But I'm different because I'm in a 12-step recovery program, and I'm remembered in some area of the Big Book, we're bodily, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually different than our fellows.
From our fellows.
And so if that's who I am, I can't be consumed in what other people are doing because I'm bodily, mentally different.
Right.
Spiritually, emotionally than my fellows.
That's cool, Mamie. And the other thing I think about, okay, so I'm a liberal. I'm so far to the left I fell off the line a long time ago, right? So I'm watching what's going on and I'm like, oh crap. But I do know that when you pour hatred on top of hatred, you get more hatred, right? When you pour intolerance on top of intolerance, you get more intolerance. So I pray for the president on a good day. I'm like, because I feel like what we're watching, so in the 12-step program, and it says this on step 10, I think, that pain is the touch tone. Okay, here it is on page 93. Someone who knew what he was talking about once remarked that pain was the touchstone of spiritual progress. So to me, it looks like what's happening culturally is that our culture, entitled, wealthy, not diverse, not inclusive, it looks to me like we're hitting the wall.
Right.
And if we are hitting the wall, I regard that as a good thing, right? And it isn't my job to necessarily interfere with that. It is my job to not pour intolerance or hatred or fear on top of that stuff, because it will make it worse. And it's what's happening from my small, slightly demented viewpoint. Yeah. So.
That I just, in the Big Book, it talks about, nothing happens in God's world by mistake. And so I think God is orchestrating all of this. I think that spiritual hunger that so many people are having these days, and I really believe it's true. And they're kind of in the background. I mean, they're not up there
Right.
in the mess. I think eventually,
It's my hope that it will lead us to sort of a cataclysmic change, which is what's needed.
it's so interesting.
Yeah. And thanks for referencing that in the Big Book. So if nothing in God's world happens by mistake, it's like when we were doing step 4 and 5, it isn't bad that people die. It's not. It's part of God's plan. Everybody dies eventually. What happened to me as a child, God didn't cause that, right? But God also does not interfere. God doesn't interfere with human beings' behavior. He just doesn't. And so how do I take that thought that nothing happens in God's world by mistake, and apply it to my childhood. Well, when I got old enough to start working with that stuff and start healing it, it was monumental, right? It was such a big deal for me. It's been a big deal for some of the people in my family. Like, that didn't hurt me. I had a difficult childhood. I was afraid a lot. But I can't be damaged by that. I'm God's eternal, beloved, favorite child, right? So are you. Whatever. Right? So that stuff made my childhood difficult, but it did not harm me. I am not harmed. I'm not harmed, right? And so then when I can take that to other people and say, oh yeah, let's get after this stuff, because you don't have to be harmed. You don't have to carry that darkness. Like Mary Oliver said in that poem about her parents, I put them in the ground. May they soften. And then I turn away, right? I turn my thoughts to those whom I can help, and God's great at sending me those people too. He'll send them right to me.
Another way that I've been turning this over a lot in my mind is it's like step 10 when we go back and do our daily inventory. I think a time like what's going on now is a challenge to go back and look at our core values. And I do have hope.
Good.
I do trust. I don't know how it's going to be, but just as you said from the Big Book, I've just seen it's not mine to fix.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You didn't cause it.
But it is my place. I don't let people sink me.
Yeah. So we have people we're going to touch and affect in our lives. Like, those are the people that I'm focused on, right? Like, what is my sphere of influence? Where would God have me bring light? How would God have me teach others what He's taught me? That's my sphere of influence. That's where I operate. Cool. You guys are all so smart. Okay.
I'm not able to whistle. I've tried to whistle, but who
Is that because of your stroke?
That was her. Nothing happens.
Well, you should have me stand beside you. You can purse your lips and I'll whistle. And then right at the end of this on step 10, learning daily to spot, admit, and correct these flaws is the essence of character building and good living. An honest regret for harms done, a genuine gratitude for blessings received, and a willingness to try for better things tomorrow will be the permanent assets we shall seek. Having so considered our day, not omitting to take due note of things well done, and having searched our hearts with neither fear nor favor, we can truly thank God for the blessings we have received and sleep in good conscience. Love step 10. Okay, so we have some things. First of all, don't miss these musical references. If you've looked at any of the music that I've suggested and liked it, don't miss these. Anybody know Christine Kane? Anybody heard of her? She's amazing. So right out of nowhere, open your heart. Right out of nowhere, open your heart. That changes everything. You're going somewhere, and all you need to know is that you're free to go. You're free to go. There's a really, really beautiful song. She hit that highway with all the faith she could summon. When courage finally comes, you never see it coming. And then right out of nowhere, open your heart. That changes everything. Really a beautiful song. And then Overjoyed is about becoming overjoyed. And it's really good too. Yeah. All of the world is designed to remind you all of the light you could find is inside you. Under all of the noise, what's it like to be overjoyed? They're really, really good songs. I hadn't heard them for a long time. I was talking to Jerry earlier, and I'm like, I don't have any songs for tonight. And he was like, what about Christine Kane? And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, what about Christine Kane? So we put on these songs, and it choked me up, you know, because I can remember hearing this music and going, thanks, God. Thanks for everything. Thanks for everything. So, I thought we have about 15 minutes, and then I thought we'd read the St. Francis prayer too. That's a prayer a lot of people have used in program, and it's one of my favorites. But I thought we'd do some quick, I like 10-minute inventories because the 4-step takes forever, and this does not. Thalia? Cool. So Thalia's up.
And this happened, and this is, I probably needed to work on this earlier, but yeah, I thought it really wasn't bothering me. And so this has been like 3 weeks now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So here's
And it keeps coming up.
Good. Here's my guideline. Something irritates you, if it's still the next day, you have a problem. You need to write about it. Okay, so whose name are we putting in the first column?
Oh, geez.
You can make one up if you don't want to.
Sally,
Sally. Let's call her Sally.
Yeah.
What'd she do?
Okay, well, I have been diagnosed with a life-challenging illness, and she came up to me and she started talking to me, and she asked me how I was, and I told her I was doing great, and she kept going on and on and on about, now don't minimize this, and kind of, it felt to me like she wanted me to be sick. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I know this is a weird, odd one.
cool. So she was
She said, okay,
invested
yeah, in having
in
me be
my illness,
well, yeah.
overly concerned. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Overly concerned. Are we going to say nosy?
Oh, I don't
Emotionally
think
intrusive?
so. Perhaps, yeah.
That's
She
a
was.
good
It wasn't
phrase.
being nosy.
Okay.
It was out of concern.
Almost
I
like
think.
she was wanting you to invite bad medicine into your life.
Perhaps.
And she was invalidating the good experience you're having.
Oh, good,
Oh,
Molly.
that's perfect.
That's perfect.
'Cause you're not having the experience that she thought you should have when first diagnosed.
Invalidated my direct experience.
Okay. Oh, I like
Very
that.
good, Molly. Who was your teacher?
Yeah, really.
You're God's favorite child.
God's favorite child,
Yeah.
right here. Okay, so how were you affected?
Okay, so.
So I am
I am truthful.
truthful.
Well,
Did she challenge your truth?
I think so.
She make you doubt your truth?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
She, but yeah, she challenged my truth. So I am,
Insulting you?
offended.
Okay, I am offended.
So
Good.
what about, are you not feeling the way that you're supposed to be feeling? Is there part of you that believes that?
Oh,
That
I
maybe
should.
I should be feeling worse about this than I am.
I am. This is, yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting
Well,
one.
it's disrespectful when you're invalidating anyway.
Okay, I'm disrespected. I am not respected.
All
That's
right.
that's good,
Insulted,
Mary.
insulted.
I am disrespected.
What is your second column? I can't.
So this is who. Sorry, I didn't write it.
Yeah.
This is what happened,
Okay, got it.
and this is how I was affected. I am just.
How about I am not hood?
I am what?
Not hood. Like you're.
Yeah,
Oh.
good. I am
Oh,
not hood.
good.
Thank you all
So
for doing this.
this is so good, Sasha.
Yeah.
Like I am invisible, or I am not. The way I feel about this is not important to her.
Oh.
Did someone say she's not allowing me to have my own experience, or she's not allowing me to be,
Yeah, like
to be in my,
invalidating her experience.
okay, so you said that, okay.
So I'm going to say I am not heard. My truth is not honored.
Not supported.
Oh, I like that. My truth is not supported.
Not supported.
I like that a lot because that's exactly how I felt.
Good.
And
And I used to say, furthermore.
and furthermore, so let's see.
So you could say,
What happened to me then?
I'm delusional. I'm delusional. About my illness, something really important, Thalia. I'm delusional about my sickness. Oh, that's really
Well,
good.
then she did kind of make you doubt your experience.
She did, actually.
Fear though?
Well, it can be repeated, but I'm delusional about my sickness is good for this column.
Yeah, yeah,
What did you need? You needed her to validate you,
yeah.
right? Does that resonate?
No way.
So I needed Sally to,
I needed Sally to just listen to me.
okay, why? I think it's so you could feel validated, Thalia.
Right, and so I needed her to listen to me, speaking my truth, speaking.
You actually needed her to validate your truth, I think. Because this has upset you a lot, right?
It has for a month.
Yeah, right. So you actually needed her to validate your truth is what you really wanted her to do, and she didn't do it. She questioned your truth. She disrespected your truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you really needed her to validate your truth.
I say it's okay to feel good.
I know.
Cool. Money not affected with this
No.
person. Sex not affected.
Hell, sex, what's that? I know, I'm thinking.
I'm going to remain silent right now, lest I get into trouble.
I was thinking.
So what you want from Sally and probably the world at large is what? I
I
want,
want validation.
Yeah, you
I
do.
want people to believe me.
support. Okay. Now, my part. We're never going to get through this, but that's okay.
Oh.
We can finish it. If you want to, I'll finish it with you later, Thalia, if we don't get through it. So my part. So we ask the question. We go, okay, this has been upsetting me for a month. Where have I been selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and fearful? So how do you know Sally? Who is Sally?
She's someone I've known since she's an Al-Anon woman,
Okay.
she's an AA woman, I've known her for a very long time. How was I so?
Yeah. So here's the thing that I do. I go to people who cannot validate me, and I expect them to validate me. So I want them to be different so that I don't feel upset. Ultimately, that's selfish, right? Because all of God's people are who they are, and all of God's people do what they do, and they're entitled, right? Even God doesn't mess with them. He lets them be who they are, right? So ultimately, it's selfish to expect Sally to be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
It's a form of playing God because you're trying to impose your will upon them.
Right. You really are, Mary. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
had to learn that
Yeah.
And it's like an entitlement attitude, like, well, they
Right.
shouldn't be that way, or they can't act that way.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah.
that's pride.
So there's probably also in personal relationships a Sally should ... fill in the blank, right? And anytime I expect somebody to be different, I'm in trouble. I'm just in trouble because they are who they are.
And you know that pride that Mary just pride, it affected my pride.
Good. So,
Because
yeah.
don't you know, I'm honest.
Right.
If I'm
And
sick,
not
I don't
only
feel
that,
good.
Thalia, you really are being brave and trying to have the right attitude and trying to trust God. And you have every right to pat yourself on the back for that. And she probably kind of challenged that too.
And I really feel that. I mean,
Good for you.
It's weird.
I'm
But I
happy
do,
for you though. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
You know.
Okay, good. So I am not validated. So if you good, I think I'm not being validated here is the sort of the mother lode of the fear. If Sally and others like her dismiss my connection to God and dismiss my thought that I'm doing well and being taken care of, and they don't validate my faith and they don't validate my hope in the medical treatment and what I'm doing, the fear is what? If these people don't validate me, then what?
Then maybe you're right.
Yes, perfect. So the fear is that Sally's right. Sally's right. I'm not okay. Now we can understand why this has been eating your lunch for a month. Okay? Does that make sense? Everybody with me? So we name the fear, we say the current or historical reason, we talk about self-reliance, and then we talk about God. We've got 3 minutes.
I'm sorry. I thought this would be 10 minutes.
No, this is a quick inventory. We're getting right through it, right? Because this is the mother lode here. This is what's really going on with you, Thalia. You're afraid that you're not okay, right? You might be afraid that you're just pretending, you know, right? Or she wouldn't be upsetting you.
Right.
Okay, so the current historical fear that you're not okay and that God doesn't have you in this. So anything in your history that made you...
Go back to everything that happened in my life when I was a kid.
Perfect.
Health-wise, I was
Oh,
going to die.
wow, wow. So childhood, serious illness. When a little kid is really, really sick, is it scary for them?
Yes. Yeah, but I was not ever really seriously ill. My mother made me very afraid of, a blister popped and I passed out and had almost a seizure from fear. This is how I was
Okay,
as a child.
okay,
I was very afraid
okay.
of dying, afraid of getting every disease.
So
I saw on
childhood
TV.
fear, Thalia,
Sally
of...
triggered your mother's.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you had a childhood fear of serious illness. I'm going to die, right? That's the fear. There's the historical reason. That's what got kicked up. Current, dude, you got some shit going on, right? So you have some things going on right now. That's the current reason. How does self-reliance fail you in this situation?
I couldn't make this go away. I mean, I couldn't.
Okay, so ruminating on what happened? Yeah, no?
Is it childhood you're talking about?
No, we're talking about
Current.
in this situation, how has self-reliance failed her? You might have been pretending that it didn't bother you that much.
Oh, I think that is
Yeah.
absolutely.
So pretending,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Defensive.
Oh, yeah,
Were
very
you-
much so defensive.
Okay, good. That's fight.
Not with
Remember
her,
when
but
Keith,
after she left.
remember when Chris talked about flight, fight,
Right.
freeze, right? So you've got some fight going on, defensive.
Well, and one
Defend.
thing that, as a child, you're powerless.
Right.
Yeah.
So now this is triggered. She might be feeling powerless. But
In that one situation.
Yeah.
right now,
Okay.
with Sally,
Yeah.
where the
Right.
solution is go to God. Now you got God.
Right. Needing Sally to believe differently so that you're okay is self-reliant behavior, right? Expecting others to be different.
Okay.
Now, you need a good prayer for this one, sister. You do. Because you've got some stuff going on, Thalia, right? So, when we get to the last column, we ask what God would have us be, do, or believe. And, like, to me, it's not about Santa Claus, God. So tell me what it's about.
I believe that God has my back.
Good.
And regardless of the outcome,
Right.
it's all okay. I mean, I really have come to that acceptance. And yeah, I must say that Sally is the only who has reacted as like this.
Oh, nice.
Can I ask something?
Cool. Yeah.
So if you really believed that, would you be defensive?
Yeah. So,
I don't know if I was. I mean, I wasn't
Or would
with
you
her
would you
at
be
all.
triggered and thinking about
Yeah.
it so much if you really believe that God's got you?
so every time we get into inventory, we usually come up with beliefs that are head to head with each other. So if I had a life-threatening illness, Thalia, I would expect for myself to have some come to Jesus moments in terms of what things were going to happen and how it was going to go for me. And I think that's what Sally triggered in you, is you have this huge faith based on your experience with God, but you also have some fear that probably came right from here, that you are somehow not going to be okay. And it is okay to carry both things inside of us. Like my childhood fears, what I say about childhood fear is if it gets triggered, it will trump anything you try to lay on top of it. You can tell yourself you can do platitudes, you can do affirmations, you can stand on your head in the corner and say Hail Marys. I don't care what you do. If a childhood fear is triggered, it's going to trump. You cannot address a childhood fear by going to your adult brain and trying to manage it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to say, oh shit. Oh shit. There is a part of me, might be a small part of me, that thinks this is the end of the world and I'm not going to be okay. And that's why Sally bothered me. If I didn't have that in me somewhere, Thalia, Sally's whateverness would not bother me, right? So it's not, here's the good news, it's not a current adult fear that you're carrying. And here's the other good news. There's a piece of you that still has this inside. It's not going to be okay, right? So the prayer would be, take away my fear that, here's what I'm getting, that sickness can harm me. All people get sick. People get sick. Everybody dies of something, right? Right? So I don't know what I'm going to die of. I don't know when I'm going to die, but I know I'm going to. Right? It isn't a bad thing to get sick, right? So take away my fear that my sickness can harm me or harm my faith. Because that's what you really want. Because you've got faith. You've got it, right? There's a beautiful scripture in the Bible that says, I have faith. Help me where I need faith, right? Help me where I need faith. And a fiery illness is a thing where, I mean, we want to call down the thunder on that in terms of our faith in God, right? We just want to call down the thunder on that, okay? And then what would God have me do? Show me how to live each day in faith. And here's the thing that really helps me, regardless of what happens. It isn't about, I really wished for a while it was about, if I do this really, really well, nothing bad will happen. But that's not what it's about, right? It's more about this, right? Take away that childhood fear that I'm going to be harmed. Does that make sense? Cool. Are you coming next week?
I'm gonna be in Buena Vista at that.
Oh, lucky you.
AA retreat
Lucky
thing.
you. When you come back for the 12th step discussion, I want you to, if you will, share with the group on how you felt about this and if you feel like we got there. Because if we did get there, Thalia, you'll start doing this prayer
Right.
as a daily practice, and Sally won't bother you anymore.
Yeah.
Does that all make sense? Cool. All right.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I love people that are brave enough to do that. Yay, Thalia. We're with you, sister.